Good evening. Welcome to Love Talk. I'm Gregory Morgan, and it's good to be back with you here again. What is that thing, that unseen force or drive that has had me be able to recover and recuperate each time and time again, through trials and losses and failures and corrections and continuing on the path of life, which, by the way, is a pretty good description of the process of mastery. When we use the word mastering, any word that has an ing at the end, ing, implies a process, something that is not a thing, but a process. So we speak of it as if it's a thing, but in fact it is a process of things. And what is the process of that we call mastering? When we say we're mastering something, what is that? Now, each and every one of you has mastered something in your life. There's not a person alive that hasn't mastered at least feeding themselves. Well, maybe there's people who need to be fed, but you know what I mean. You've mastered feeding yourself. You've mastered dressing yourself. You've mastered brushing your teeth. You've mastered driving. You've mastered cooking for some of you. Some of you have gone on to master other disciplines in your life, such as dance or martial arts or piano or painting or you name it, right? Anything that you've done 10,000 times, you're a master of, unless you're a complete idiot and you've done it 10,000 times the wrong way because you're stubborn and it still doesn't work, then you're a master idiot. But we're not talking about that. Mastery is a process of trying something, doing your best at something, applying with your intention to do well at something, which is applying your intention to do well is different than trying, okay? There's no trying, and I'm not even going to address trying, okay? Trying is an illusion. There's no such thing as trying. You're either doing your best right now, and you may fail at it. Your best may not be good enough, let's face it. The first time you ever drove a car, you weren't good at it, and you failed. You maybe ran into the curb or jerked the car back and forth or stalled the motor. You were not good at it. You failed. Then you corrected and you continued. And then you probably failed some more and you corrected and you continued. And you failed some more and you corrected and you continued until you got pretty good at it. Now, if driving a car is not your thing, apply this to anything that's in your life that you've done at least 10,000 times. You're a master at it. You can do it with your eyes closed. You can do it in the morning, in the night, in the dark, in the light. You can do it when you're sleepy. You can do it when you're hungry. You can do it when it's raining. You can do it when you're upset. You can do it in any condition, all times, in any circumstances. You can perform this thing that you've mastered. So mastery isn't just a question of practicing, because imperfect practice will give you mastering the imperfection. Mastery is practicing and correcting when you fail. So what is it that needed to be corrected? Back to the original conversation that I was addressing, what is it that drove me personally as a man? But the show's not about me, it's about men right now. It's about something that I want, a gift that I would like to deliver for men. And even it's not so much for the sake of men themselves, although they will be greatly benefited, what I want to give them. Who will be the greatest benefactors will be humanity itself. Who will be the greatest benefactors will be the women and the children that love these men, that need these men, and that admire and honor and respect and want to have these men in their lives, as opposed to rejecting, disrespecting, not wanting those men in your life or having any room for their humanity. So when I broke it all down, it's easy for us to theorize, to create theories, and theories are great, but just like every art, there's two parts. There's the theory, and then there's the practice. And the theory and the practice give the reality. When you go to become a doctor, for example, you learn the theory of medicine. You learn the theory of various parts and healings. But it's not until you put those things into practice and you practice them, in your internship or whatever, and then you eventually open what is called a practice, right? You have a medical practice, they call it. They don't just say you have a business, you have a medical practice, or you have a psychology practice, or whatever it is that you're practicing, right? A dental practice. You're practicing, and practicing is about making mistakes and correcting and moving forward in a more refined, sophisticated, often more simple and purified way. So in the workshops that we teach for men, called Honor, Integrity, and Mastery, part of mastery, what's the mastery part? The mastery part is mastering the distinctions of honor and integrity. Most people, if you ask them what is honor and what is integrity, I can tell you from my experience, if you ask 100 different people, though, you'll get about 100 different answers. In fact, we've done experiments in our workshops where we'll put out like 5 or 6 words, and then each person will write down 5 or 6 words of their own on a piece of paper, and then they'll go around and they'll ask 5 different people, what does this word mean? And they'll write down the answer. And so they'll come back and they'll have like 25 answers. Each person, very few words will people agree on and give you exactly the same interpretation of that word. So the words honor and integrity are highly misused, highly misunderstood, and missing in the culture, missing in our lives. And I believe that the entire world suffers from a lack of basic understanding of honor and integrity. So I know I've talked about it from various points of view on this show, and it would seem that from first glance, the idea of approaching honor, let's just take that word for example, would be that, there's something that we all understand what it is, we all agree on what it is, we know when it's there and we know when it's not. While that may be partially true, a deeper investigation into what that is, what honor is, and what it is for you, well, it turns out that it's a very personal experience. There are certain things that we could pretty much culturally agree on as being honorable, but even then, that is questionable. I'll put a harsh example, honor killings. There are cultures in which there are honor killings, where literally a family will kill a young woman, a daughter, a niece, or whatever, in their family because she has broken some code of honor, or it is perceived that she has. It doesn't even need to be proven. In an attempt to restore honor, or some version or brand of honor, into the family name, to reestablish honor for who? You can see just from that one example that now the men, and probably the women too, I don't know, in that culture, in that society, in their world, they're doing the honorable thing. In their world, that's what's honorable to them. That's their definition of honor. I bring up this harsh definition of honor. There were times in history when the honorable thing, if somebody insulted you or your wife, was to take dueling pistols and to go out at dawn and to walk 10 paces and turn and shoot the other guy, or swords, to face off with swords, and it wasn't over until one of them was on the ground dying. That would be the honorable thing to do. So a lot of things have been done in the name of honor. So honor exists as a conversation, and it's a very personal conversation. I would say it is one's conversation with one's self, and by that I mean one's higher self, one's more noble self, one's self which sees itself as a part of the whole of humanity, that has the interest of the well-being of others at heart. So I'm going to keep exploring this idea of honor, because honor existed throughout time, and in different time periods had different meanings. Just like I pointed out with the dueling swords and pistols, nobody does that anymore, and I doubt if anybody would consider it the honorable thing to do. So the honorable thing to do has changed throughout time. In the culture of the samurai, the honorable thing to do, if you have dishonored your master or been perceived to, or even if your master wanted to make a point to somebody else, he could tell you, take out your sword and perform seppuku, kill yourself right on the spot, and you could be completely disposed of, and that would be the honorable thing to do to honor your master. So a lot of weird things that we would consider weird or unusual in today's culture have been done in the name of honor. And so it's easy to understand how we could be a bit confused about what that would mean and how would I apply it in my life, and why is it that I feel so uncomfortable around this whole question of honor. Why is it that I say that I want to be, or that I am an honorable person, and yet there's some doubt somewhere in one's own mind, in my mind, in your mind, as to what is the honorable thing in many situations in life? So I want to examine that. I'm going to put that aside for a moment and come back to it, the whole conversation about honor, because it is I could do just the whole show just on the word. And in fact, I'm working on a thesis about the history of honor, so that people can see how it has evolved throughout time. Honor was born on the battlefield amongst men. Honor is not something that was born amongst women. I'm not saying that women cannot be honorable or that we should not honor women. I'm saying that honor definitely exists in the masculine domain, born on the battlefield, born in life and death situations where the animal thing to do, the survival thing to do, the I must stay alive and live another day, no matter what instinct that each of us have. It's an animal survival instinct from a very primitive part of our brain that evolved to a sense of belonging with others and watching out for others, primarily as a survival. In other words, my chances of survival are greater if I belong to a group, if I'm out hunting, or if I'm in a war party. It's better that I belong with this group of warriors than if I'm out on my own, obviously. So the belongingness and the bond between men became stronger than their bond with their children and families, their women and children. The bond between men became stronger in those life and death situations where they would literally risk their life, meaning the possible survival of the women and children that they were in charge of taking care of. Because if the man died, very often the women and children would be next, because they simply wouldn't be able to survive in a scarcity of resources. So men considered themselves disposable, if you will, in battle situations and in hunting situations for the greater good. They would put themselves in life or death situations, put themselves at risk and at danger for the sake of the group, for the sake of the tribe, for the sake of the women and children and the other warriors or hunters around them. That is a leap in consciousness, where one considers the well-being of others greater than one's own. That is a leap in consciousness. That is not an animal instinct. That is a human instinct. But then honor takes it a step further. Honor is when one of your mates has fallen and you risk your life to go back and get them. You run into the danger to secure another human being, knowing that you too could lose your life. That is beyond survival. That's beyond taking a risk for the greater good. That's believing in something greater than yourself and being willing to put your life at stake for it and standing for it in the face of all adversity with no backup. That's what has a fireman run into a fire to save somebody who might be in there, etc. That's what has a warrior run into a battlefield to bring back a comrade. So we call that valor, we call that honor. Now, when that gets brought back into the society of women and children, it is little understood and very little appreciated. It is just simply no longer a thing. It's no longer valued in a polite society of women and children. Oh yeah, they may pin a medal on you, and they may give you the Medal of Valor or the Medal of Honor as a ceremonial recognition of some great thing that you did. However, that fades into the background very quickly when it comes down to, who's going to pick up the groceries and who's going to change the diapers and who's going to pick up the car and who's going to go to work and bring money home and who's going to clean up the house. All of that sort of fades into the background, as you well know. Then where does honor live? So the idea of distinguishing honor for oneself, what is honor for you, is a very important step. It is a leap in evolution. It is a leap in consciousness for each and every man. And just because maybe you served in the military and they taught you a military, we'll just say that word, a military brand of honor, doesn't necessarily, as I just pointed out, apply to your everyday life. So what is honor in your everyday life? What is honor in keeping your bank account correct? What is honor in your everyday real estate dealings or whatever it is that you do? What is honor when it comes to somebody abusing somebody else and you're there? What's the honorable thing to do? What's honorable when you know that somebody is cheating on somebody else and that person is your friend and they're, what's the honorable thing to do? You have to decide. It's a very personal thing. You have to decide what is right for you as a human being. And so in the Honor, Integrity, and Mastery workshops, we're not trying to teach men how to be. We uncover the layers, if you will, of conditioning that have been piled on top of the honor that is already genetically inborn within that man. Each and every one of you, I'm speaking to the men now, each and every one of you have inborn within you a hero, a warrior, a sage, a poet, a father or protective figure, a supporter and a lover of society, of women and children. You have that genetically within you. You have it within you, not just on a genetic level, but spiritually, emotionally, mentally. That is within you, and it has come as part of the program. Just like when you buy a computer, there's certain programs in there. This is an installed program that comes with your DNA. Now, what I just said was a general statement, and I know that there are those of you who are psychologists and psychiatrists who could say, yes, well, what about the sociopaths and so forth? There are human beings who have damaged or malfunctioning genes, we could say, in which they actually cannot sense or feel some of the same things that you and I do. And so I'm not talking about the exceptions. I'm talking about the broad general rule, and certainly anybody that's watching this show. If you've watched this long, I've been talking about honor for about 20 minutes now, 30 minutes. So if you've watched for that long about a guy talking about honor, then you're not one of those people, so you don't have to worry about it. I'm talking to you. Honor has been inborn in you, and so in these workshops, I don't have to teach people honor. It's already there. Much more than I could ever say about it is already encoded within your own inner knowing, and it is an inner knowing that surpasses logic. It surpasses learning. It is already known and can be experienced directly. And so there's really nothing I can say about it that would be as rich and deep and real as helping you to experience it personally and directly. And then even you won't be able to have the right words for it. It's a personal experience of one's own sense of honor And it has always been there like a quiet voice anyhow. And in some of you it's louder, and some of you it's almost non-existent. You know, you've suppressed the voice of honor for so long that you couldn't hear it if, we put it on loudspeaker, usually through drugs and alcohol and sex and gambling or whatever else you're addicted to. So you've just completely smashed down this voice of honor. So now you live by some other code, but it's in you. And it doesn't really matter to me what has happened to you. It's important, but it's important to you. It's important what's happened that has had you gradually over time be culturally conditioned and suppressed, be religiously conditioned and suppressed, being suppressed by your parents, by your environments, by the molesters and the abusers in your world who have, eventually squashed out any sense of honor and integrity in you so that you don't even know what it is anymore and you don't care. We call them workshops because it's a lot of work and it takes about 3 days. But over that 3-day period, that stuff gets cleared away. And as it gets cleared away, your own inner sense of inner knowing of who you are, why you're here, and a sense of purpose begins to emerge and come out into the open. And then the question is, what are you going to do with your life now that you know who you are? So like I said, these workshops aren't teaching you to be like me or teaching you to be like anybody else other than you. The purpose of the workshops is to mentor men in becoming the mature masculine leaders that they truly desire to be, really to be the man they want to be, so that your love of humanity, your love of women and children and nature drives you from the inside out to live a life of honor and integrity and to leave a legacy of honor for future generations. That's what the workshops are about. It's not about trying to teach you the right way to do things or the wrong way to do things, and then supporting you in mastering that distinction because, like driving a car, you're not very good at it yet. So we support you in not just only distinguishing it and bringing out those qualities for yourself, but then we have programs called the Advanced Honor, Integrity, and Mastery Workshops, which is another big leap forward. And then another 6-month program called the Hero's Journey, in which you're daily being supported by partners and private sessions to get these distinctions so into your life that it's like how you drive now. You don't even have to think about it. You can do it in any condition at all times, in all circumstances. You will live a life of mastery, being guided by and driven by honor and integrity. Honor is one of those things that the more you try to say what it is, you discover that it's easier to notice what it is not. Honor is a very personal sense of good and bad and right and wrong, and that each of us has it. Each of us are born with it and a sort of inner knowing of what is best for the greater good of all concerned. And being able to make choices based on what is the honorable thing to do, it sounds like, from a certain perspective, it may sound like, oh man, that's difficult to always have honor and to choose to be honorable at all times, in all circumstances, no matter what. Especially if I live in an environment where other people aren't being honorable, then what? Sometimes being honorable means that you'll be laughed at, means that you'll be ridiculed, means that you'll be called names or made fun of by those who have chosen to live dishonorably. You can even get in trouble for living honorably. We have whistleblowers, what we call whistleblowers, people who see illegal or dangerous things that are being done by corporations and they go tell somebody, even though they've signed a contract saying that everything in there is secret and they shouldn't ever tell anybody or whatever. They'll actually put themselves in jeopardy, risk their future and their financial well-being to do the right thing, driven by an inner sense of honor, or what is, again, for the greater good of all concerned. Okay, if what your concern is your well-being ahead of all others, then that's the opposite of what we're talking about. That would be the opposite of honor. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, don't call it honor, because it's not. It's just survival. And you could say, well, it's dishonorable. Yes, you could have that argument if you were committed to being right about what honor is, I have no interest in that. I only have an interest in what is going to be for the better good of all concerned. And so that doesn't leave me any time to argue about what's not honorable. I could care less. I know what is honorable. And so that's what I'm saying. Once you discover what honor is, and you begin to live it in your life and master those distinctions, then there's just that, and it becomes very apparent everything that is not that. And you simply don't concern yourself with it unless it tries to attack you, or unless there's something that impinges upon your space. Then you may find yourself having to deal with it honorably and forthrightly. One of the martial arts that I studied for many years, and I really studied it out of necessity, and I've discussed this before on the show, so I'm not going to cover it a lot, was Aikido. And I began Aikido not to learn how to fight, but because I was a very good fighter, and I always ended up hurting people, and then I felt very badly about it afterwards because they'd get hurt a lot. And I wanted to learn how to deal with situations without having to get into some kind of a violent interaction. And I guess what I didn't know at the time was that I was literally, who I was being was attracting that kind of an energy towards me. So it's not that I ever went out looking for a fight, because I never did, but I somehow or another, wherever I was, there was somebody being a jerk that needed to be corrected. And I felt that it was my place to do that. So I don't know if any of you have ever felt that when you're young and full of energy, that it's kind of like, well, if nobody's going to deal with this, I will. And so I just sort of elected myself as the sheriff wherever I went. And if I saw somebody getting out of hand, I would feel compelled to straighten them out. Somehow or another, there was always one. After I began to study and practice Aikido, one of the things that I learned was that it's very, very easy to hurt someone, but not necessarily honorable. Even if they're being out of line or being a jerk, what would be more honorable would be to have an interaction in such a way that they were able to see a better way of being. What if I could not allow anyone to hurt me or others, but at the same time offer them a way to behave or interact differently that would be a better way, a more progressive way? So in many ways, it was the hardest thing that I've ever done, and it still is, to not get into a violent or, volatile interaction with someone when that may be something you're very good at, and to instead humbly ask them to take a look at another way of being and to teach them so that you can actually help society rather than just try to deal with that one situation or that one person. And so I started learning that there was a more honorable way of dealing with conflict, and that leads me to integrity, because it takes a great deal of integrity to be able to do that in the heat of the moment. So integrity is only any good when you don't feel like having it. Does that make sense? Integrity is useless. The only time it's any good, the only time it's useful, is when you don't feel like having integrity and then you have it anyhow. If everybody just had integrity all the time, there would be no integrity. It would just always be integrity. So there would just be that's how it would be, you see. But it's only when the lack of integrity shows up in your space, in your world, right in front of you, and you have to deal with it, and you don't feel like it, and you don't want to, and the easy thing to do would be to have no integrity, like everybody else, so that you could just sort of blend with society, blend with the trend and the way things were going, and maybe nobody will notice that you didn't have integrity in that moment. Here's the problem. If you're living an honorable life and you've chosen honor as your guide, then it will require having integrity whenever you don't feel like being honorable. If you felt like being honorable all the time and there were no dishonorable situations that ever called forth something dishonorable or out of integrity in you, then it wouldn't be a problem and you wouldn't even need to talk about this. It would just be the way it is. And I can imagine that there were times in history when there were people who actually lived this way, but I don't know. I know that people aren't living this way now. I know that the call of society, the call of culture, the pop culture, any level of culture that you want to speak about is not calling forth the highest, most dignified and noble responses out of human beings. It's not in the music, it's not in the poetry, it's not in the artwork, it's just not there. Now, can you find it? Yes, of course you can find it if that's what you're looking for. But mostly, if that's what you're looking for, you'll see not that, not that, not that, not that. It just won't be in your life because the general culture is pulling towards being disassociated, meaning unrelated to each other, disassociated from oneself, meaning not even related to yourself, like not even self-examining or looking back at yourself and saying, why did I say that? Why did I make these choices? I know this is self-destructive, and yet I keep doing it over and over again. You never look back at yourself. You just keep doing, which is a lack of honor and integrity. So the call of society is to disassociate oneself, even from oneself, to disassociate from those, even those that are closest to us. There's me and then there's those not me's over there, those others, as if you're apart from them, to disassociate from one's work, one's career. Like, oh yeah, this is me, but I have this job. It's just a thing I do to get money. So there's a general disassociation, and disassociation is another word for, or another way of saying, if you will, disintegrated. Disintegrate. So integrate means integrity, right? To integrate means to cause or have or manifest integrity. So manifesting integrity isn't right or wrong or good or bad. And that's where we'll get into the examination of that word, and then why would we have honor, integrity, and mastery workshops for men. Integrity is doing what you said you would do when you said you would do it. That's like kindergarten level. That is grade 1. That is the very, 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 very lowest level of integrity, is simply being where you said you would be when you said you'd be there, doing what you said you would do when you said you would do it, and in the manner that would be expected even if nobody's watching. We could add that, right? In the manner that one would expect, that you know that others expect. Even if nobody's watching, even if nobody will ever know, you did what you said you would do when you said you would do it. You know, you said you would do 10 push-ups at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you did 10 push-ups at 6 o'clock in the morning, even though everybody was sleeping. You just kept your word with yourself. That would be a kind of basic integrity, you see. So, to take it out of the realm of right or wrong or good or bad, integrity is simply what works. And it could be said, it is said, that nothing works without integrity. Without integrity, nothing really works. It gets by. You can get by without integrity, but not for long. It's not actually working. What I call working is when something actually does what it says it would do, it's what it's designed to do, and it does it reliably every single time and gets better and easier, okay? So if in your life, if you're living with integrity, it becomes easier and easier. How you know your life is working is that it's almost effortless, that things, people, things, events, the things that you intend, the things that you dream of, the things that you say you want to have in your life, whether they're physical things or experiential things, an experience of love, an experience of health and well-being, an experience of financial abundance, actual money in the bank, or the experience of being connected with others and having friends and a great social life, whatever it is that you say you want to have in your life and that you don't, those things start coming to you quite easily if you have integrity. So it's not that, and when you don't, they don't. It's always a struggle. It's always just outside your reach. It's always something that you're striving towards. So if you find yourself in a life where you're striving towards, or where on the other end of the spectrum you've completely given up, you don't even strive anymore, you just have given up on your dreams and they're no longer there, and you can't even remember what they were. If you find yourself in a situation like that, or if you find yourself in a situation where maybe you're suffering about something that you've lost or given up on, or that was just always out of reach, or that you had for a while but couldn't hold on to. Any of those forms of suffering, and make your own, and by suffering I mean continual pain, repetitive pain, some kind of dis-ease. And those dis-eases manifest physically eventually. They suppressed anger and sadness show up in the liver and in the stomach as stomach ulcers or cancer of the liver. And, I could go on down the list of things. The people have heart attacks from a broken heart, from lost love or suppressed love, et cetera, okay? There's a lot of physical manifestations that come from emotional losses that result in ongoing pain and suffering. So if you're experiencing those kinds of things in your life, and who isn't, right? If you had the integrity to just look, if you could gather yourself to have a sense of honor and integrity and look back to the source of the cause of that, and look past the point where it looks like there's an illusion that somebody did something to you, that you were a victim. Look past that to see where you were at cause in that situation, where you actually got authentic with yourself. You got honest with yourself. And then you begin to share with the others in your environment about your own inauthenticity, about where you had actually lied to yourself. I've been saying this, that, and the other about my mother or my father all my life. They did this, they did that. My example is I complained for most of my life that my father was abusive, that he hit me, that he beat me up and everything. When I actually looked at it as I was an older man, and I looked back, and I had a son, a stepson that I had raised, and the many times that he made me so mad I wanted to hit him. And I chose, thankfully, good luck for him, that I did Aikido before he came along. But I chose to not have a violent reaction because at that time in my life I had a choice, whereas earlier in my life, when I was younger, I didn't have a choice. I just reacted. I was able to see for myself that my father was just doing the best that he could do with what he had, and with a very rebellious, disrespectful, mouthy young man who I was, and that I was terrible. I was just terrible, that if I had a kid like me, I don't know what I would do. I was completely out of hand and unruly and disrespectful, and there was just no controlling me. So I could see how he, given that he was raised in, he's a man from the early part of the century who went through World War II. I could see how he could just lose his temper. And when I began to see that about my father, my story changed. And I no longer could say he was abusive. I just couldn't say that. It's just not true. I couldn't say that he was, a harmful person or a bad person. All I could feel for him was love and respect for, not just killing me outright. He was violent with me, but that was the best he had. When I got to the place where I could forgive my father for all those things, it was actually that I saw there was nothing else. There was nothing to forgive. He didn't do anything wrong. He just did what he did, which was the best he could. And when I got to that point where I actually saw that there was nothing to forgive my father for, what I really saw was I was ashamed. And I asked my father to forgive me for all those terrible stories that I told about him, all of those times that I told all of those people about what an awful man he was, and how he was violent and abusive, and how he really hurt me, and how he was crazy, and all the bad things that I said about my father that disempowered him in other people's eyes, that made me look like a victim and poor me, and made him look like the villain. I asked my father to forgive me for that. And what opened up for me in those moments was the space of honoring my father and seeing the honor that he had for me. In fact, all of those times that he was upset with me, that he was violent with me, what he was standing for was having an honorable young man and teaching me honor no matter what. And he taught me honor in the manner that he had been taught by, the drill sergeants in the Army in the World War II, and his own father, who was a very tough old cowboy. And that's all he knew. That's what he thought was the way to teach a boy. And so he did the best he could. And he honored me in that moment and allowed me to honor him. And in doing so, I was able to transform my idea about what is right and wrong and good and bad. And I wanted to be able to share that with you, not because it's my story and it's important about me, because I'm just another guy. I have now discovered that there are thousands and thousands, millions of men who have suffered at the hands of their fathers or other men in their lifetime. And so rather than bonding with other men, rather than having a society in which we honor each other and respect each other as men, we've become disassociated, and each man is alone in his own little world and looking towards mostly women, their mothers, their wives, or something, or other women that they're not married to, but looking mostly towards women for some kind of acceptance and understanding and some kind of validation, and seeking to prove themselves as men to the women, seeking validation from women for their masculinity, their manhood. And I'm here to tell you, from my experience of working with hundreds, thousands of men, and from my own personal experience, that only men can validate manhood between themselves. Only men can say what is truly an honorable man amongst themselves. And sorry, ladies, but this is not a domain in which you could interfere. It is something for you to admire and appreciate. It's something for you to respect. It is something for you to encourage. It is something for you to benefit from. And that is the main thing I want to say here, is that when men get together in a circle of honor, when men circle up or get together in a name of honor and integrity, there is a wisdom there that surpasses the ages. There is a goodness there. There is a kindness there. There is an overwhelming generosity. And you could call it love, and I will call it love, but when it's expressed, when men express their love, it's an honoring. It's a lifting up and acknowledging the nobleness of another man, of men in general, of humanity, and the natural outcome of that, the natural outcome of men bonding together and honoring each other is, on the one hand, firstly, that they want to hold each other accountable. They're asking the others, hold me accountable, help me to stay in this space. Never let me betray you or myself again. That's just naturally there. And that requires integrity. That requires being held accountable. And that requires calling somebody out if they are getting out of honor and bringing them back into honor, helping them get back into honor. So that's integrity amongst men. And the natural outcome of that is a love of humanity, is a love for the species. And that love pours over into its expression of protection and wanting to provide whatever is wanted and needed for women and children in society. That's just naturally there. It's a natural expression of masculine identity to want to protect and provide for society, not just their society, but all of it. You know, as you begin to expand in your spiritual awareness, as you've been able to expand in your heart, you're not just concerned about your brother anymore, or your sister, or your father, or your brother, or your cousins. Your concern expands out to touch all of humanity. And so it's a natural self-expression, expression of one's self, an honoring of oneself, to want other men to have the same experience that you've had, you see? And to want to share, even though it's beyond words, even though what you're experiencing is coming from your inside out, and it's like a spiritual awakening, it's like a heart awakening, it's difficult to express to somebody who hasn't been there. It's difficult to articulate. It's difficult to tell people about it. But it's like you're lit up. You know, something lights up like a Christmas tree, and you go from being just an ordinary man trying to survive and get by in the world and carrying around some deep grief that men tend to all have. Most of the men that I've met have a very deep well of something that is just, they're terribly sad about. They're grieving over something. And I'm going to tell you what I think it is from my experience. It's the grief of knowing that your life has missed the point. It's the grief, the unconscious knowing that there is a greatness in you that will never be realized. There is a possibility in you that you have been given, a strength, a wisdom, a power, a love that no one will ever know and you will never fully experience. And that you have a gift that's unique that only you can carry, only you can deliver to the world, to the universe, and that the world will be poorer if you do not deliver it. The world will never have this magnificent gift that's your life, and terribly, terribly sad about that. There's a profound grief about that. There's an everlasting doubt that no matter what you accomplish, no matter how much money you make, no matter how many women you sleep with, no matter how many diplomas you get or great accomplishments or things you build or acknowledgments that you receive or awards, no matter what comes across the bridge at you as something that an acknowledgement, it will never touch the possibility that you are as a man as long as you carry within you this doubt. Am I man enough? Am I big enough? Am I smart enough? Am I rich enough? Am I strong enough? Am I fast enough? Am I young enough? You know, these doubts haunt men, and then they'll never admit it, not outright, at least not to the ladies or the children, because that would be to show their weakness, their perceived weakness. It's not really a weakness, because that doubt comes from their greatness. That shadow comes from the light that there are. Without light, there would be no shadow. And so there is a greatness within us that when it is unrealized, it hurts. It feels like a pain that's pushing you, that feels like a pain that's pushing from the inside out. And most of the time when men are drinking too much, smoking too much, doing whatever, eating too much, it's so that they don't have to feel something that they deeply already know. And that is, they're not enough. Now, when I say that, hear me rightly. I don't mean that they are not enough, like the truth. They think they're not enough. They believe they're not enough. So they keep compensating for it. That's why they got to have a faster car or more money or, I don't know, whatever else that competitive thing that we have. Men are always competing, right? Their highest priority seems to be competing. You know, who's stronger, faster, smarter, richer, taller, bigger, whatever, right? So there's this competition that can drive the world to war, and that's all about this inner doubt, this inner knowing that their greatness will never be manifest. Now, knowing that, if you knew that, and you knew that there was a way to help men reach that in themselves and to bring it forth and to do it in the presence of other men so that they're not alone when it happens, and that they can see that other men have the same doubts and the same thing. It's kind of like the big joke. It's like the emperor's new clothes. It's the illusion that you are alone in the things that have hurt you and suppressed you and made you feel like you're not man enough. And you think you're the only one and that nobody else knows and that you're fooling everybody. And you are agreeing to be fooled by them. In other words, you start playing this game early in life. I won't tell you what I really see about you, but don't you ever tell me what you see about me either. That's why you don't look in each other's eyes. That's why you turn your head and look away when you shake hands, and that's why the handshake has no energy in it because it's limp. That's why you don't connect heart to heart with somebody. That's why you don't look them straight in the eye and tell them what you really see and what you really think. That could get you killed in some countries. That can get you hurt, or at least thrown to the outer circles of the inner circle of belonging. You know, it doesn't belong in our culture to tell people what you really think and to tell it to them straight. And because it doesn't belong, we tend to say it with too much energy or anger sometimes. What if you could say what you really think? What if you could really tell somebody who you really are and what you really see about them? And you could just do that with love, with the intention of bringing out the highest and best in them, and with the interest of touching their deeper, greater good, and bringing that forth so that they had the freedom to choose to always manifest their good, then wouldn't that be something worth having? Wouldn't that be something worth doing? And wouldn't you be interested to meet others like you? Wouldn't you want to get together with men like you and find out what can we do with all this wisdom and power and strength that's coming out through us, and that we find synergetically when we're together? How can we take care of and serve the women and children in our lives, our mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters? How can we share with them the mature masculine wisdom that is a guide for and an example of what it is to be a man in the world? And how could we encourage other men to come forward and to participate in that? Thank you for listening. This entire talk has been about honor, integrity, and mastery. You can find out about it on our websites at embracegrowth.com. There is a schedule of events. I wish you all the best. Thank you for watching. This has been Love Talk. I'm Gregory Morgan, and I'll see you back next week.